Welcome to World Gone Weird, discussing what the heck is going on in the world today.
Yeah, and weird feels like an understatement this week, doesn't it?
It's definitely a lot to process. I mean, where do we even start?
I was gonna say, I'm starting to think normal is just a setting on the washing machine at this point, because the world, sheesh, it's on spin cycle, and the clothes are all different colors now. It's a mess.
Well, let's try and bring some structure to this chaos. I've been looking at this report from the Council on Foreign Relations, the 10 most significant world events of 2024, and it's a lot.
Oh, perfect. More things for us to worry about. I'm sure that'll help my blood pressure.
But maybe understanding it a bit better can help us feel less helpless, you know?
Yeah, understanding why the sky is falling will totally make the falling pieces hurt less. It's just a fun fact to keep in mind as your head gets bonked.
Okay, let's start with something that's both amazing and terrifying, the space race. It's apparently alive and well. We've got lunar landings, Mars rovers, and even reusable rocket technology. But then, it's also mentioned that Russia is allegedly putting nuclear weapons in space. I mean, what?
See? I told you. It's always something. You give these countries an inch in space exploration, and they're trying to launch a nuke from orbit. This is why we need to be wary of anyone who doesn't share our values, shall we say?
Well, I think there are multiple angles to this. Yes, the idea of weaponizing space is incredibly dangerous, but there's also the immense scientific progress being made. The potential for discovery for finding resources, it's huge. And I mean, it's not only US and Russia, right? China, Japan, Europe as well. There's progress everywhere.
Yeah, it's like a playground fight over who gets to play with the space Legos. Only instead of Legos, it's potentially planet-destroying nukes. But sure, let's focus on the good parts. The shiny moon rocks and the rocket ships that go whoosh. Who cares if they might be aimed at us?
That's because those main players you were talking about don't play by the rules. They never have, and they never will. You can't just have trust on a handshake. There must be safeguards in place and enforced through strength. It's clear as day that a global agreement is useless if the ones causing the issues don't want to agree.
But that's not a reason not to try, right? The Accords, I think, are a step in the right direction. It's a framework, and it can be built on. The alternative is, well, a free-for-all, which wouldn't benefit anyone.
Free for all. Imagine the Space Olympics instead of races and gymnastics. It's just countries launching ICBMs at each other. The commentators would be like, and now, folks, Russia is attempting a triple backflip nuclear strike on the US. Will they stick the landing? Oh, no. It seems they've taken out the moon instead. I think I'd rather watch synchronized swimming.
All right, let's ground ourselves a bit. Next on the list is what they are calling China Shock 2.0. Basically, after a slowdown, China is ramping up exports again and flooding the world market, and this is causing a lot of economic unease.
But isn't this a complex issue? Yes, there are valid concerns about job losses in some sectors in the West, but also affordable products that help people. There are things like solar panels and electric vehicles that accelerate transition to green economy. If we're serious about climate change, shouldn't we be embracing cheaper solutions?
Yeah, cheaper stuff for everyone. Who cares if our local factories are shutting down? And hey, if they're green stuff, all the better. Now we can be unemployed asterisk and asterisk smug. Like, oh yeah, I'm jobless, but at least I bought this solar panel made with slave labor for $5. I'm helping the planet. This feels like the plot of some dystopian movie, right?
It's a balancing act, definitely. The economic disruptions are real, and they're fueling political tensions. Countries are slapping tariffs on Chinese goods, and that can easily lead to trade wars. I guess it's the same story as with space. It's got both good and bad aspects. I mean, it's a logical consequence of mass production and globalization, but who bears the price?
It's our workers who are paying the price. It's always our workers, the hardworking folk who are losing their jobs because of it. I'm sorry, but we have a duty to protect our industry, not to help the CCP expand their influence. It's like, what, did we learn nothing from the USSR?
I agree that the impact on workers is important, and we need social safety nets to help people transition into new jobs. I think there has to be better global trade and cooperation, a real focus on fair practices. It's not as simple as just saying stop buying Chinese goods. That won't work. There has to be a better solution.
Yeah, let's just slap a Made in America sticker on everything and call it a day. Who cares about the rest of the world? I mean, it's not like interconnected economies are a thing, right? We'll just live in our little bubble, singing patriotic songs while the rest of the planet does whatever the rest of the planet does, probably something horrible because, it's the rest of the planet. We should probably invade just to make sure.
All right, let's move to something equally depressing, the war in Sudan. It's just horrific.
The civil war is raging, with tens of thousands killed, millions displaced, and now a famine in Darfur.
I swear it never ends. Some place is always tearing itself apart. This is the problem with these areas with unstable governments and weak structures. Without rule of law and respect for order, they end up in this kind of chaos.
And it's always innocent civilians who pay the price. The report mentions war crimes and a devastating famine. The failure of international diplomacy and the UN to bring peace is just heartbreaking. This isn't just numbers. These are people's lives being torn apart.
Sudan, always a party, except for the famine, the killing, the war crimes, the utter breakdown of society, and the massive displacement. So, basically, just your average Tuesday for someone in Sudan, it sounds like. I am sure if we send another UN resolution, they will all just stop fighting and hug each other.
What's truly infuriating is how these conflicts are fueled by outside actors. Both sides in Sudan have powerful external backers. It's a proxy war, and Sudanese people are just pawns. And then the UN Security Council is sitting around making speeches instead of actually doing something? It's a complete and utter failure.
Well, the UN has always been a paper tiger. It's just a forum for talk, nothing else. And why should any nation go out on a limb and risk their own resources and the safety of their troops to intervene in some faraway country? If the Sudanese can't figure it out themselves, then maybe there's not much we can do.
I disagree. We can't just stand back and watch this happen. The international community needs to step up and enforce a ceasefire. We must hold those who commit war crimes accountable. We must send humanitarian aid to the people who need it. This isn't some distant problem. This is a humanitarian crisis that we have a moral duty to address.
Morality. That's a tricky one, right? What even is morality anyway? I mean, who gets to decide that killing people is wrong? Maybe in Sudan, murder is considered a sport, a fun family pastime. You know, like bowling or knitting. Anyway, we should get them some more weapons, if nothing else, just so we can be entertained. I'm only half joking.
Yeah, great. Another thing to worry about. So, we've created something that will make all our jobs obsolete and then just decide to regulate it when it's too late. Like the internet or social media. We never learn. All this AI hype is probably some globalist plan to control us all.
But the potential for good is enormous. Think about diagnosing diseases earlier, improving education, and creating more efficient solutions for climate change. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. I think the focus needs to be on how we can develop it in a way that benefits humanity.
Oh, great. So now the robots are going to judge us too. Like, oh, you didn't recycle properly, I'm deducting 50 points from your social score. I can see it now. The robot overlords will be running everything, and we'll all be just sitting around being told what to do. I just hope they can at least make good coffee.
The report also points out that the cost of entry is huge. Access to skilled workers, massive electricity and water consumption. So, it could widen the gap between rich and poor countries, like you were saying. The power structures in the world will just be replicated in a digital domain.
And that's why we need to be at the forefront of this. We should control AI, use it to our advantage, strengthen our economy, instead of trying to distribute it evenly among all, as if that's even possible. Because I can tell you, whoever controls AI will control the world. And I'd rather it be us than some authoritarian government, that's for sure.
Oh, yes, responsibly and humanity, the magic words. Look, if AI takes over the world, I'm just hoping I'm on its good side. Maybe I can be the court jester. Please, oh great AI overlord, tell me a joke. It could be our only hope for survival. Or we could just pull the plug. Nah, let's see how this goes.
All right, so moving on. It mentions how momentum has shifted in Ukraine. Russia is taking offensive, with huge casualties on both sides. It's also mentioning the fact that North Korea is involved now, sending troops. What the actual?
That's what happens when you have a weak, incompetent leader in place. The EU is fractured, the US is a laughingstock, and Putin knows he can take what he wants, and nobody will stop him. This whole Ukraine mess was completely avoidable. It just needed a strong response.
The human cost of this war is devastating. All those lives lost, families destroyed, and the fact that other countries are getting involved. It highlights the interconnectedness of these global conflicts. Also, the report mentions that calls for a ceasefire are growing. Isn't that good? There has to be a negotiated solution.
Oh, a ceasefire? I bet Putin is totally shaking in his boots. Like, oh no, we can't kill any more people. We'll get a strongly worded letter? I wonder how long it would take him to launch another invasion after a so-called negotiated peace. It's like those cartoon villains who always say, I'll be back before getting away.
And they are saying that Russia is having a manpower and material advantage, but its economy is faltering, while Ukraine is pushed to its limits.
and Western support is wavering. It's a recipe for disaster. I mean, the long-range missile authorization by the US could help, but it might also escalate things, wouldn't you say?
It's too little too late. This war was going to happen. The response is pathetic. We should have given Ukraine all the weapons it needed from the start and made it very clear that any further aggression would be met with overwhelming force. Instead, we got a slow drip feed of aid, which is just enough to prolong the conflict and put more people in danger.
But escalating the conflict won't solve it either. It's a very complex situation, and it is important to be providing Ukraine with defense capabilities. But I also think, like the report mentioned, that it is important to have a path to a diplomatic solution and avoid further human suffering. A ceasefire, a negotiated peace. If it does stop the war, it's always a good thing, right?
Yeah, I am sure the people being blown to bits would be totally happy with some diplomatic solution that leaves their country occupied by Russia. I am sure they're going to have a tea party and bake a cake. Look, in war, there's always only one thing: violence. And the side that uses violence more efficiently will win. It doesn't matter about peace or anything. This isn't a Disney movie.
This report also talks about the fact that incumbent political parties are taking a beating. Voters are punishing politicians in power in many countries, like India, Japan, South Africa, UK, the US. Seems like there is a global anti-incumbency mood.
And it's about time. People are finally waking up. We're tired of the same old empty promises and corrupt politicians. They have ruined the economy. They have failed their people. And they get kicked out. It's what they deserve, and I'm glad to see it. Maybe we're finally learning.
I think it shows that people are increasingly frustrated with the status quo. They are looking for real solutions, not just empty rhetoric. I hope it translates to better governance, a more focused approach on solving the problems people care about. It's a chance for change, which is always a good thing.
Oh, change. That's what the people want, eh? I'm sure the new politicians will be completely different. They're going to be so good and competent. Like, maybe they'll turn all the problems into rainbows and unicorns. Or maybe they'll be just as bad, if not worse. But at least now the asterisk get to be corrupt for a while.
It's not a bad thing. We need leaders who aren't afraid to stand up to the establishment, to challenge the status quo. We need someone who can make a change and who won't buckle under pressure from the global elites and their woke agenda.
Well, there is one strong leader that just made a massive comeback, according to this report, and it's not a good one, in my opinion. Number one on the list is Donald Trump winning the U.S. presidential election. They are calling it the greatest political comeback in U.S. history. I have no words.
See, I told you. The people are waking up. They want their country back. They're tired of the woke agenda, of open borders, of endless wars, of all that socialist nonsense. Trump will make America great again. Mark my words.
This is concerning. I'm not sure it's a sign of anything good. A political comeback after all that happened. It shows a real breakdown in democracy if such a divisive figure can win again. It's very worrying.
The report mentions the Republicans winning control of Congress, but with the smallest margin in U.S. history. I think the report is very clear on the fact that this will lead to a major shift in U.S. foreign policy. We already saw it with Trump's first administration.
Good, finally. No more apologies for American greatness. We need to put our own country first. We should build the wall. We should secure our borders. We should stop being the world's policeman. We should go back to our traditions. It's the only way to be strong again.
But what about global cooperation? What about our responsibilities to the rest of the world? Isolationism is not the answer. We need to work together to address these global challenges, not abandon everyone else. This isn't a game. This is people's lives.
Global cooperation? Yeah, it's a lovely thought, but it is the same as wishing that the world was made of cotton candy. It sounds nice, but it's never going to happen. We need to look after ourselves. That's the only thing that really matters. I mean, if the rest of the planet is going down the tubes, I'd rather have a front row seat in my own nuclear bunker, with a few beers. Oh, it is all our fault for not recycling, they say. The planet will be fine. It'll be a hot planet, but I'm sure we'll figure out how to live in it. Probably with some sort of high-tech air-conditioned bunkers, while the rest of the people are just melting away in the streets. It's also dystopian. Like some terrible movie I don't want to watch, but still will.
It's just another bureaucracy. These climate conferences are just excuses for politicians and elites to fly around the world on private jets and talk about saving the planet when. They are the ones causing most of the problems. I am sorry, but it is all a big waste of time and money. Let's just focus on real problems.
Even if it is not perfect, it is better than nothing, right? It's a space for dialogue and an agreement for funding. And yes, there are some successes with technology. It gives me some hope that we can still change things for the better. It is still important to try, don't you agree?
It's just a mess. It's always been a mess. These countries have been fighting for centuries. It's not going to change now. It's a good thing that we stay out of it and let them sort themselves out. Because as we can see, intervention only makes things worse.
The human suffering in Gaza is heartbreaking. So many people have lost their lives, and the risk of famine is increasing. These conflicts seem so endless, it is really hard to see where the end is. What about trying peace, not endless retaliation, do you know? I think isolating countries is counterproductive. We need to seek dialogue and work together to address global issues. It is better to approach the situation with a calm and open mind instead of reacting with knee-jerk aggression. The world needs cooperation, not more division.
Don't tell me I know. I think I need a stiff drink and some peace and quiet to contemplate the mess we're in.
I think I'll try to focus on the positive parts and see where I can help make a difference. I refuse to give in to despair. We still have a responsibility to act.
And I am just going to laugh so I don't cry. It's the only thing we can really do, right? Or we can just all move to Mars. I'm sure they have good Wi-Fi there.
Yeah, it's the same story, isn't it? Another day, another horrific crime. At this point, I'm not even surprised anymore. I expect this kind of stuff to happen. I'm pretty sure that by next week we will all be immune to this kind of news. Humanity, what a joke, I tell you. Just a big joke.